We're in the book of James. We are in the second chapter. Last week we talked about, well, what did we talk about last? Anybody remember? We had a smaller group last week. And so we talked about Abraham and Isaac, and specifically Sally?
Abraham and Isaac.
Yeah, but what about them?
I'm sorry, I responded.
The sacrifice of Isaac.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, right. I mean, not just, not the birth of Isaac, and the sacrifice of Isaac.
The trauma.
He seemed to come out okay. He didn't get a lot of space in the Bible after that, so it might have been traumatic.
We also talked about Ishmael.
Talked a little bit about Ishmael. Do we know anything more about Ishmael?
Well, that he is believed to be the father of the Islam.
The father of Islam. Right. And then the reason we got into Abraham is because James does, right? Was not our ancestor Abraham justified by works when he offered his son Isaac to the altar? We thought that was a strange way to justify yourself. So we looked into it. We pick up today, chapter 2, verse 24. And we have another example that James thought to be a good example. And so let's read 24 and 25, I suppose maybe 26 in the second chapter, and ask ourselves what James is trying to teach us here. Somebody have that they want to read? Al?
Likewise, was not Rahab the prostitute also justified by works when she welcomed the messengers and sent them out by another road? For just as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is also dead.
Okay, who's Rahab?
Prostitute.
Who was it? Somebody.
Should we read it? Want to read that story?
Sure.
Okay. Anybody know where it is? Diane?
No.
Joshua 2.
Joshua!
Wow.
Yeah,
Very good.
And where's Joshua? Where's Joshua in the Bible?
2:25.
Sixth book.
The what book?
Sixth
Sixth
book.
book. Right, so we have the Torah, and after the Torah, what's in the Torah? Yes,
5 books.
5 books. It is, Torah is in the Old Testament. It's the Pentateuch, right? And the Pentateuch means what? 5. It means 5. And what other books in the Pentateuch?
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy.
Numbers and Deuteronomy. And after we get through those first 5, the Pentateuch, then we have Joshua. And who was Joshua? He did not come from Jericho.
I fought a battle there.
He was the son of Moses' assistant. Who was that? Nun. So he's the son of Nun, and he is associated, Al, with Jericho, but he come from Jericho. He came from where?
Egypt.
He actually didn't come from
No,
Egypt.
he was born on the way.
The desert.
Desert, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
all of the folks that came from Egypt died in the wilderness. Why did they die in the wilderness? No, they did have food, Margie.
Logical reason for death.
No, not only did they have food, let me be specific. What kind of food did they have in the desert?
Manna.
And
Honey.
Locusts.
no, neither one of those.
That's why we're here.
They did have manna and they had something else. Come on. Ellie, what did they have in the desert?
Birds.
Birds, yes. Good. Sounds like, is birds. Sounds like
Whale.
quail. Sounds like whale. It's quail. So they had quail. So they had plenty, Margie. But
Sounds awful.
God said that none of them would come into the promised land.
Wait, none of them? Not a single one of all the people in
The children.
Bad news, huh?
Before.
Nope, they did not. They did not. And who was the last of all not to make it? Not to cross the threshold, not to cross the
Moses.
line. Moses.
Yeah.
Moses did. So none of them made it. So it's the next generation. And so the next generation is led into the Holy Land by Joshua. So Joshua then is the first book after the Pentateuch, book number 6 in the Bible. And so he's out there and he's got a lot of people and he's commanding them and folks are hearing what they're doing. All right. And they come to a city. And what is the city? Well, what's the city
Jericho.
they come to, Al? Jericho.
Yes,
Let's read it. Let's read this story. Chapter 2, Joshua. And this is who James thinks is the exemplar of faith. This is an example of exemplar faith. Who wants to read this whole story? Yeah, what book do you have? I know you have the Bible. What?
Revised Standard.
Okay, we'll go with the Revised Standard.
From, you want me to read chapter 2?
Just chapter 2.
Okay. And Joshua, the son of Nun, sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, "Go view the land, especially Jericho." And they went and came into the house of a harlot, whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. And it was told the king of Jericho, "Behold, certain men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land." Then the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, "Bring forth the men that have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. And she said, "True, men come to me, but I did not know where they came from. And when the gate was to be closed at dark, the men went out. Where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them." But she had brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order on the roof. So the men pursued after them on the way to the Jordan, as far as the fords. And soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut.
Yeah.
Okay. Before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, "I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away from you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites that were beyond the Jordan, and to Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no courage left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God is he who is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. Now then, swear to me by the Lord that as I have dealt kindly with you, you also will do kindly with my father's house, and give me a sure sign, and save alive my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death." And the men said to her, "Our life for yours. If you do not tell this business of ours, then we will deal kindly and faithfully with you when the Lord gives us the land." Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was built into the city wall, so that she dwelt in the wall. And she said to them, "Go into the hills, lest the pursuers meet you, and hide yourselves there 3 days, until the pursuers have returned. Then afterward you may go your way." The men said to her, "We will be guiltless with respect to this oath of yours, which you have made us swear. Behold, when we come into the land, you shall bind this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and you shall gather into your house your father and mother, your brothers, and all your father's household. And if anyone goes out of the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be upon his head, and we shall be guiltless. But if a hand is laid upon anyone who is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head. But if you tell this business of ours, then we shall be guiltless with respect to your oath, which you have made us swear." And she said, "According to your words, so be it." Then she sent them away, and they departed, and she bound the scarlet cord in the window. They departed and went into the hills and remained there 3 days until the pursuers returned. For the pursuers had made search all along the way and found nothing. Then the 2 men came down again from the hills and passed over and came to Joshua, the son of Nun. And they told him all that had befallen them. And they said to Joshua, truly, the Lord has given all the land into our hands. And moreover, all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of us.
There we go. Thanks, Alan. So, what do we hear in that story, and why the heck did James pick it as that of faithful, exemplary faith this person ran? What do you make of it?
She was very loyal and favored her family, not the nation or tribe that she belonged to. So that was primary in her concern, the lives of her family and household.
That was right. That's true.
But was she really of that tribe, or was she kind of an outcast or something?
Why do you say that?
Well, because they call her a harlot or a prostitute or something like that, and
But she was worried about her family.
It's true.
Yeah, but I thought the works by which she was justified, according to James, was the hiding of the 2 Israelites.
It is.
And I mean, maybe there were other
But she
things
seemed
that
to be
she
doing
was
it for her
justified by, but that's what's pertinent in this context.
Right. That, yeah, that there are those, right? What else? So it's interesting, right? I mean, you wonder, but she has a family there in the city. She's a prostitute, which is not, sort of a high-end level of sort of systems, sort of respect, or something probably put her in that, nobody chooses that job. So there's something circumstances, either they were outsiders to the tribe or something put them in those circumstances.
But it's when she said, because of you, for the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. She had made that independent decision for herself.
Right. To recognize the sovereign nature of God, the God of the Israelites. We're not exactly sure how. What are the things we think triggered that loyalty? Everyone was afraid of the Israelites, right? And they were afraid of because they had taken over like the
they
Amorites.
must have some unusual power in order to be this powerful. So
Exactly. So they
God must be on their side.
attribute that to God. So she decides to go with the winning team.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so James says that was her works. Her works were hiding and saving these guys. What happens at the end of the story?
But she just wasn't saving herself, she was saving her family.
She was saving her family. It's true.
And she knew that God had given them the land. Like she had faith that God was the source, God was the source of the land and of giving that.
Right. Yeah. So it wasn't their strength that she was God, wasn't it? Right. So she didn't necessarily trust the Israelites, but she certainly trusted God. Right. That gave them the power. And then it says, so they go in chapter 6 to take Jericho. Seventh time when the priests had blown the trumpets, qualifier for being a priest, playing the trumpet. You guys know that. Joshua said to the people, shout, for the Lord has given us the city and all that is in it shall be devoted to the Lord for destruction. Joshua announces, only Rahab the prostitute and all within her house shall live because she hid the messengers we sent.
Chapter 6.
Right, so chapter 6, verse 17. So God's good to God's promises, or the Israelites are good to their promises, and she was saved. She believes in the power and sovereignty of God, and that is of higher priority than her family, or she does protect her family, than her king, right? Maybe even than the people she hid. She said, this God is sovereign God. Now, if you know and believe the sovereign God, that God is all powerful and knows all things, and has the capacity to take a little tribe that's wandered across the desert and into Jericho and chase out the Amorites, then you're like, I'm going to put my money here I'll invite my family into it too, right? I mean, so she did do that. But I don't know if she made the decision to save her family. She made the decision because of the sovereignty of God. And then she saved her family, right? So this happened, and then this happened after. And that's just like Abraham, right? Remember we talked about Abraham. If you believe in God and you believe in the sovereignty and the capacity of God to be generative, to be capable, to do the impossible, then you act a certain way. And she acted a certain way against what is natural. What is natural? Well, what is natural is to, stay with your tribe, stay with what you know, stick with the folks on your side. She did the thing that was not natural. Abraham did the thing, arguably, that wasn't instinctual, right? And so what is he saying about this understanding of God?
I think he's saying that it took a lot of faith.
Yes. Yeah, it took a lot of faith in what?
He's saying
In
obedience.
God.
Obedience, right? Saying obedience.
So it's an act. It's not,
Yeah.
it's just it's an act. It's not necessarily justifying the act in your head.
Right. It's doing something. Both of these folks did something. There was a little counterintuitive, right? It was arguably not in her best interest to go against her tribe. It was arguably not in Abraham's best interest to kill his own son, particularly if he believed in the promise that God made. Well, actually, God made the promise about the stars in the sky after that incident with Isaac. So they did something that reflected their belief in God's sovereignty, right? And the thing that we see in both cases is this is against conventional wisdom. This is against good survival tactics, right? This is not what you would naturally do. They did something unnatural, or what's another way to think about that? Supernatural. They believed in the supernatural power of God to do the impossible. So faith is not necessarily doing the practical thing, but it's believing in the supernatural capacity of God in any given situation. And when you do that, then it allows you to be what kind of person? Who else have we seen do supernatural things? Christ? Well, yeah. Christ. Yeah, Christ is a little more confusing in that regard, given his status as the second person of the Trinity.
Moses?
Moses, right? Totally counterintuitive. Dude walks back into like the tiger's den, right? And then throws it down on the Pharaoh, which is, I don't know, not so great. That's a great example. Moses is a great example.
The
Apostles, right? They were doing that stuff all the time in front of the Sanhedrin. Peter, when he went and he talked in front of the Sanhedrin. Who else? Paul, yeah. Paul. Every time he's getting beat up all the time. He's always showing up in town and getting clubbed and stoned and yelled at. And Paul. So why did Paul do that? Why was he not afraid? See, I think this is the key word for me. This fear. And folks that believe in the supernatural power of God are fearless people. Who else was fearless? Was Joan of Arc fearless? They say she was. Right? Who else is fearless?
Mary.
Who?
Mary.
Yeah. She was in an awkward spot. Fearless. Who else is fearless?
Thomas Becket.
Abraham Thomas Becket. Right?
Harriet Tubman.
Harriet Tubman. Wow. Talk about fearless. Oh my God. Talk about trust. Harriet Tubman had fainting spells, right?
Yeah.
Which is super complicated, when people are chasing you and you don't know when you're gonna have a fainting spell. Talk about faith, right? Yeah, that's a great example.
And they called
Saint
her.
Stephen.
They called her Moses.
They did call her Moses. That was her secret name, Moses. And they would sing, what is that? Go down this way down. Like when she was around, like that was one of the songs the signal songs that she was in the neighborhood. Yeah, that's a great example. Who else is fearless?
Saint Stephen.
See? No, I know, I'm not, absolutely Saint Stephen was. Just like Steve Day. Saint Stephen was fearless. What do you say, Kim? I don't say it.
Is it fearless or brave?
Yeah.
Fearless. Why? Why to be fearless and not brave?
I'm
So
asking.
fear is the opposite of love. And so fearlessness means love infused, right? And when you are love infused, you are what? You're living out the will of God in your life.
Yeah.
Right. And so love is the corollary to fear. Love is the thing that drives out, doesn't say that in the Bible, love drives out all fear. Right. So when you find a fearless person, you find a person infused with love. Now, brave is different. Brave is the thing I bring to the table. Right. And often it's calculated. I'm brave because I got a big stick. I had a cousin, we call him uncle, but my dad's older cousin, Don Kahn. And Don Kahn was about 6 grades ahead of my dad, and he was about this tall, and he was always in trouble, and he was always fighting. He was always in a fight. And so when my dad got to school, they're like, "Oh, you're Don Kahn's cousin." Oh, so it was not great following Don, but Don always either carried a knife or a club. So he would get in fights, and he would pull out his club and start beating on guys with the club. So he was pretty brave, but he certainly wasn't fearless, especially if you have a knife or a club. Anyway, he went on to be okay. He survived that. Luckily. Although he took my dad hunting once with a bunch of his buddies. They're probably drinking too much, and one of the guys shot my dad when he. Exactly. So my dad, he was a little kid, so they sent my dad out to get the birds they shot, right? So he was like the retriever dog, and somebody shot, and he got sprayed with buckshot, and he was far enough away that but Don, my dad, the good news, Don beat him up with his club. So not my dad, the other guy. So brave is what I bring to the table, or what Don Kahn brought to the table. But fearlessness is what Desmond Tutu brings to the table, or Harry Tubman brings to the table, right? It is this deep, or Dietrich Bonhoeffer brings to the table. It is this deep understanding that it is impossible for humanity to penetrate your power because you're infused with the love of God.
And also trust them of God.
Oh, absolutely. You kidding me? Oh, yeah. No, you're totally thrown down on that side of the table. And what could happen if you are that fearless? Steve Day, what happened to Stephen?
Well, he got stoned.
He did get stoned, right? So the outcome might not always look like the good deal, right? So the Stephen outcome was not like, wow, you nailed it. It's
Sort of.
whoops, right? But what happened ultimately to Stephen?
He
Same
became
thing
the
that
first
happened.
Christian martyr.
Well, you got to be a martyr. You not only got to be the martyr, the first martyrs, right? But what's better than that? What did Stephen know that we know? But what did Stephen know that caused him to be fearless?
Unity with God.
Unity with God.
Loved by God.
Loved by God. So was he loved by God before he got stoned?
Yes.
And then what happened when he got stoned?
Went to be with
And what happened after he got stoned?
With God.
So he understood the continuity of relationship that exists between us and God. When you believe that, right? That's the key, right? When you trust in that, then you act a particular way. You act fearlessly. Abraham, fearless, right? Rahab, fearless. Stephen, fearless. Harry Tubman, fearless. With whatever they have at their disposal. That's the idea. So then you think about it, like go a little further. What would a world look like with people that live like that?
World filled with love.
A world filled with love, right? And a world filled with love, seen how? What would we see in that world?
We would see connection between all people.
Oh my God, right?
And
You'd
God.
connection, right? You'd see connection with all people. You would see things that look incredibly generous, right? So often we spend so much of our time doing things out of fear, right? Building whatever we're building out of fear. And so you'd see a world that looked fundamentally different. That's the Jesus thing. Like, that is the simple message that we understand as Christians. I've told you guys about this before. We've talked about during the last plague, remember? You don't remember because you're too young, but the Black Death in the Middle Ages. Bill wasn't around it then. John was, but Bill.
All of the episodes.
So but Ray, you remember the stories talking about how the Christians went back into the cities filled with plague. Right, so everybody's like coming out of the city, and then on the other side of the street, you have people going back into the city. Why were they going into the city? Because they were fearless. Because they were fearless, right? And there had been a little bit of a low ebb in Christianity prior to the plague. Right, it was a pretty static system, and it was pretty hierarchical, and people weren't coming to understand the deep value, right? The plague broke that open in a huge way. And I wonder sometimes if it's not going to break things open in our culture, like around what's important. Rich, what do you think of that? You're like, no.
Well, I'm back to the question of brave versus fearless,
Oh, okay.
which is a question much debated in other contexts as well. And one part of the argument is that if you're fearless, you can't be brave, because bravery means doing the thing you're going to do in the face of your fear. And so I wonder if it doesn't diminish the virtues of people in difficult situations if they're actually fearless. I doubt that Harriet Tubman was fearless. I'll suspect that she was quivering with fear a lot of the time, but she proceeded anyhow to do what she did. Sometimes maybe she didn't proceed because she thought the risk was too great.
So it's interesting.
And I'll bet. So I thought that was what I thought was the question.
It was the question, but I like the answer.
Well, so that was it. So here's the thought. So I think so. So was Harriet Tubman? I don't know this, but was she quivering with fear? Was she afraid of her circumstances? Yes, and she also continued to do the thing in the face of it. So what does that mean? Well, it means that her body was going to respond a particular way to the reasonableness of the situation. Number one. Number two, she probably didn't do reckless things. Why wouldn't she do reckless things?
I want to go back half a step and say that there were probably things that she didn't do because she felt the risk was too great.
Perfect. But why would that be the case?
Because when you say that the risk is too great, you're probably afraid of what the outcome might be.
Or
God's telling her what to do.
God was telling me what to do. Or
Live to fight another day.
yes. And there's nothing wrong with being reasonable. Like fearlessness and stupidness aren't the same thing, right? But also there's the other piece of the Christian puzzle here of loving your neighbor. So she is leading people out. Part of that responsibility is to get them out safely. So she has to, and that's a loving action, right? So she may say, okay, we're not going tonight, or we're not doing this thing, or we're doing this thing because her love for them, her trust in God, her fear, right? For sure. We're all wrapped into that package. But the thing that makes us overcome the fear is the love, right? Yeah. Loving. So that's what I would say. So it doesn't mean she wasn't scared, right? Or highly alert, or making on the run shifts. I'm sure she was, like any good field commander, right? She was just that, but at a lot. What?
I think when talking about fear, we need to distinguish distinguish being aware of dangers.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're aware of dangers, you avoid doing reckless things, you avoid doing things that are not reasonable. But being aware of dangers maybe isn't the same thing as fear in the sense that we're talking about. The fear that makes you not act.
Right. The fear, and I would maybe say fear, another thing to think about is selfishness. Right, so right, because selfishness is another way of saying selfishness, maybe sin, right? So sin is when we turn away from God to hunker down to keep this thing working, whatever this thing is. It could be my body, could be my family, it could be my resources, right? It could be my job, it could be, so fear over and against the openness of love that, sort of like a closed system versus an open system. Christianity is an open system, not a closed system. So
instead of fear, aren't we talking about faith and trust in God? Because obviously these people we talked about had such trust that it overcame their fear and caused them to be brave.
totally. And again, back to the James thing, right? James is like, do something. Like you got to do the thing. And so when we go back in history and we look at these incredibly loving / fearless people, so it's interesting. So why, when we look back and you look at, there's a great story, Judy, you know this story, because where'd Judy go? Forget it, Judy. Judy, so Judy, is on Desmond Tutu's board, his foundation board in South Africa. Great story of Desmond Tutu. Are you? Well, she's thinking. A great story of Tutu when he's in South Africa and he's having his outdoor worship service and they're down in this bowl, right? You guys know this story? They're down in the bowl having a Eucharist service with just a bunch of folks, and there's all these South African police sort of materialize around the rim of the bowl, the hills, like sort of up above, and he sees them and he goes down and he stands in the middle. And he says, "Oh, look at the game's over. This is Christ is won. You are included at this table. Come on down, set down your guns, bring them down if you want. Come down and join us because it's over, right? The separation is over. This is well before it was over, but he's like, it's over because Jesus wins, right? And that is fearlessness. It's also loving. But when you look back in history, oftentimes we'll say Martin Luther King was fearless instead of Martin Luther King was loving. St. Stephen was fearless as opposed to loving. So it's interesting how, why do we do that as a culture? Why would we be more inclined to call somebody fearless than loving?
Fearless implies strength.
Possibly, yeah. You see, when we call them fearless, we get to look up to the person. When we call them loving, we got to look up to God. And I think we're more inclined to look for human heroes than divine relationship. See the difference, right? So, so we love Harriet Tubman, right? Or we love Desmond Tutu, or we love Joan of Arc, as opposed to we trust in God. And that's what James is getting at. Right. So they show us how to do it. We don't want to look up to them. We want to just do it ourselves within our own context. And then we can all be that fearless, or better yet, that loving. You with me?
I was going to mention Martin Luther.
Martin Luther.
Yeah, that he was fearless at the start, but maybe as time went along, and he got off track of that.
Martin Luther King. That's not the one.
I was talking about Martin Luther King.
But I was thinking, I only
You were
listened to the
thinking
first
Martin
couple
Luther.
words.
Yeah.
Martin Luther, I don't know, maybe who are a product clip?
You're the one
Was Martin Luther fearless?
right now, but I
Absolutely.
called to remind.
He said, what did he say, Dwight? I can do no other?
Yeah, I can do no other. Had to go to my Protestant scholar.
Yeah.
So anyway, this activity is super important. We can.
But Dwight, you take all the martyrs in the 1st century and 2nd century. I mean, there were hundreds of these people that died for the faith. And if it weren't for that, there's an expression that the church is growing in the blood of the martyrs. And it's just not, it's many, many people that expressed and showed that kind of love and fearlessness, I would say.
And what empire did it tumble?
Roman.
Brought them to their knees, right? The martyrs brought Rome to their knees.
Right.
Because they could not fight the fearlessness of the early Christians. They had every weapon, they had every spy, they had all the money and all the power, they had everything, and they could not stop and the problem is, what happened when they killed one Christian, Clip?
Yeah, more would pop up.
Well, more would
That's right.
pop up, and they kept taking care of the widows and the orphans, and this showed people the love of Christ brought these people to do what they did.
The more Christians they killed, the more Christians showed up. It was entirely counterintuitive to their strategy. And nothing they could do could stop it. Finally, who gave up? Constantine gave up. It's like, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in.
You said that he gave up?
He gave up. And
He
it was,
wasn't a believer, he gave up?
he said he was a believer. I don't know, but possibly he was a believer. But he joined the team, right? He's like, I'm getting on board here because,
People are too powerful.
yeah, and they don't have anything. And, what do you do? That's, people have nothing to lose. So let's let's talk about, let's don't quite move on to chapter 3 yet. That'd be too quick. Let's stall it out a little bit. Also because we don't have Bible study for a couple of weeks, so I don't want to jump ahead. So any more any thoughts on the activity? Let me ask this question. What does this mean for your life? Bill?
I'm hearkening to the New Testament scripture, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. Going back to last week's discussion on Isaac, of course Isaac was terrified. He was being asked to kill his own son, but he also knew that his own son was a miracle that was created by God. And so his faith, his trust was in the God that already done the miracle. I mean, God could have given him another son or could have resurrected Isaac, but Abraham trusted greater in his God than in the fear that was in his heart.
That's entirely what we talked. That's exactly what we talked about last week. That's exactly right. Abraham had a lot of data points of trust with God, and before he even got to this point, right? I mean, he had the dancing pot, and he had all sorts of stuff going on. So, but the question is, do we have data points like that in our own life? Abraham had them.
Let me go on for one more second. Take that scripture and say, if God was telling me to sacrifice it would be my first daughter, would I have so great a faith in God that I would proceed earnestly toward doing that, trusting that he would either stop me or he would, he'd say, I already gave you twins. She's just like the other one. But what I'm saying is personalized.
What do you need?
Think about your own faith and trust in our Lord.
It's interesting. The story of Isaac and that whole scene. We do have to remember the context as well. So you and I don't live in a context time where child sacrifice is common. It's less common now. But when Abraham was hanging around, even though it was in the Jewish era, even within the Jewish community, child sacrifice was not a thing. Child sacrifice was a thing in the community in which they resided, right? So if God tells tells one of us to kill our children, that's super far outside the context. In Abraham's time, it was more like, I don't know. But it would be something that we're used to now. Maybe we don't do it, but it's in our system, right? And what Abraham did there, God just totally gave the Hebrew people the reality of the significant shift in what God favors, or what's important to God personally. So I think it'd look more like that for us, Bill. I don't know quite how it would look, but it would be more in our context that we should act with faith. So I hope, so my answer is, God will never ask you to do that, but God may ask you to do something that's closer to our system. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Since the hope. What else? Any other thoughts on this before we have a prayer? Anything online? Anything in the room?
We didn't answer the question exactly, what does this mean for your life?
What does this mean for your life, Diane?
Very.
I just wanted to hear other people's opinions.
No.
Taking notes from
It's
this.
time.
Amendment of life.
Also,
Well, that's my answer.
what does that mean?
Amendment of life. You know what I'd like you to do between now and when we get together,
January 7th.
January 7th, between now and January 7th, look for an opportunity to be fearless. Okay,
I just missed it, didn't I?
probably. What was it?
Well, you asked me a question.
Yeah. Ding, 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 ding. Diane blew her chance, but you still have yours. Wow. That's right. That actually is a great example of that. We set that up, Diane and I. We rehearsed that earlier. All right, let's say a prayer. God, you're a great God, and we're so grateful to come and just worship, talk, and think, and share lives, and wander into Scripture and see what's happening there, and tie it into this space in which we live, the context of our lives. Let us be fearless. Give us a chance. Surprise us with a moment, and we'll be ready because we've thought about it. We'll be ready because we trust you. We'll be ready by our faith. For this holy season we enter into, well, for the birth of Jesus and for the season of Christmas. Bless us that we may be people who are faithful followers of you. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.